Hey, it's Christian Jones, and I'm here to give you a small update on what I've been seeing going on in the Alberta land market. Periodically, I put out the Alberta Land Report, which touches on what I've been seeing, what other professionals have been seeing. If you want a copy of that, just shoot me an email at 1988jones@gmail.com, and I can make sure you're on the subscriber list. But a little bit of background on me. I specialize in selling big tracts of land around the greater Edmonton area, anything from 5 acres, 10 acres, all the way up to quarter sections or sections of land. I work with all the big developers like Qualico and Hopewell and Brookfield, and I work with the farmers and helping them sell their land and everything in between. So the investors who may purchase a piece of farmland hold on to it for several years and then sell it out later to the developers. So in a nutshell, what I've been seeing in the market, I would say in the 13 years I've been doing this, this has been the most volatile year in the land that I've seen. Q1 was pretty slow. Part of that was probably seasonality with, Christmas and people were in Hawaii or in Mexico. But as spring took off, the market, I started getting lots of calls, lots of inquiries, offers were being generated, and that was pretty strong during Q2. And then, during summer, it slowed down again. Probably people were in Kelowna, looking at Ogopogo, or maybe they're in Drumheller checking out the dinosaurs. It slowed down a little bit. But I'd say in the last 3 weeks, so it's almost December here now, things have picked up again quite a bit with, seeing offers being generated, phone ringing off the hook again. And so what I wanted to show you was a diagram just to help illustrate the volatility of the market right now. So if you look in this diagram, you'll see it's broken into two graphs. One is Edmonton up top and Calgary down below, and this is raw land sales over 10 acres. And so you can see, the peaks and valleys of both. And if you look right around 2020, 2021, when the government of Canada had the lockdowns, um, you'll see the volatility strengthen. So there'll be higher peaks and lower valleys, and so you could see the volatility increase. And that was, largely because of the uncertainty in the market. It wasn't just the land market. It wasn't just the real estate market. It was also markets like the stock market. We saw that go up and down. You just pick one, and people were scrambling to figure out where to place their capital. What also contributes to that is moving interest rates. The Bank of Canada has been playing with those. That also has a factor. So back to the chart here, if you look at it, you'll see that dotted orange line in both, and that just represents kind of an average over the last 5 years or so. And you can see that transactions have been, slowly edging upwards in the amount of volume for both Calgary and Edmonton. Edmonton a little bit more. But part of this also, these peaks and valleys, like I said, are seasonality. So take us to the next slide here, and that's composite benchmark resale home prices. So if you look at this chart, you'll see there's four colored lines. We have Toronto and Vancouver represented by yellow and blue, and then we have Edmonton and Calgary in orange and purple. So what's interesting to see, obviously there's a big delta between Calgary and Edmonton versus Toronto and Vancouver. But slowly it looks like Toronto and Vancouver they've been settling down a bit in the last couple of years here. Meanwhile, Edmonton and Calgary have been upticking, and it's interesting to see over the last 20 years, Edmonton and Calgary, those prices, even though Calgary is a little ahead, they often parallel each other, equidistant until, say 2022 or so, where Calgary started to pull away from Edmonton. So with, land prices climbing, they climb because often house demand is climbing. And so why is house demand climbing? Well, part of it is, the heavy inflation that we incurred because of those government lockdowns during COVID-19, which slowed housing production. So developers were they weren't going to work as much. It's harder to get in the office, it's harder to push things through, it's harder to get permits through. People that produce lumber, they weren't cutting trees down as much, they weren't producing as many nails, as many shingles. All those things cause prices to be driven up. And so we see that, that's basically we see things inflating. Also, year over year, property taxes are going up and up, but there's also hidden taxes in development land. Things like policies that a government will put in place where now instead of the government maybe making a rec center, the developer is now responsible for making rec centers or community centers or say fire halls. And so those costs aren't borne by the developer maybe initially, but those are passed down to the consumer later by manifesting in higher prices in homes. Basically, it gets passed down to us. Another reason that we are seeing, I believe, higher prices going out there right now in land is interprovincial and international immigration. So here's an interesting slide. So this is for Alberta, and so if you look at it, you'll notice there's kind of three colors on this bar graph. So there is the light blue, that's the natural increase, or basically women having babies. And so you can see basically since the COVID-19 lockdowns or when, all those COVID shots were going out, you can see the birth rate has dropped a fair bit. That those blue bars are quite a bit skinnier now. You'll notice the dark blue lines, that's the interprovincial net migration. And so that's people moving between provinces. So from Alberta to BC or from Nunavut to Newfoundland, people moving around within the country. And then the light green, that's international immigration. And so that's basically people coming from other countries into Alberta. So as a reference, in April 1st, 2024, in the year preceding that, Alberta's population grew by roughly 4.4%. That's roughly 200,000 people came into Alberta. In Q1 of this year, about 50,000 people came into Alberta. That's a 1% increase alone. This is the highest year over year growth rate since 1981. That's longer than I've even been alive, and we're setting these records. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you go to our national parks, for example, check out Lake Louise or Moraine Lake. Now you have to book a shuttle just to go see those amenities. Or if you want to, have you noticed every time you have a cold down, you go to the Medi Center, the lineup gets a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. Our hospitals are backlogged. It doesn't take a genius to figure out where are these people coming from. If you go to the mall or you go to Best Buy or you go to Shoppers Drug Mart, you just look around and it's pretty easy to figure out. A lot of these people are coming from India. So that's a dynamic that's been changing. Here's a diagram also from Statistics Canada. It shows the net population movement into Alberta for Q1 of this year. So, we see about 3,500 people from BC have moved into Alberta, about 5,500 people from Ontario moving into Alberta. It's not to say Albertans aren't moving out there too, but the net amount is more people moving into Alberta. So in international uh, immigration, that's roughly 33,000. So you add all these up, and that's roughly the 50,000 I talked about before that came into Alberta in Q1 alone. So why are they coming to Alberta? What brings people to Alberta? Well, lots of times if you're coming from a country and you hear about Canada, what do you know? Where are you going to go? Lots of times you'll say, well, I know Vancouver, I know Toronto, or you'd be placed there, and that's where you end up going. But you arrive, and all of a sudden you start realizing just how high costs are to live in those cities, especially housing costs. And maybe it's a little bit more difficult to get a job than you originally thought. And so, you know, people start asking around, start figuring it out, and they go, oh, maybe Alberta is not so bad because I've heard about this Alberta advantage. And so they're moving possibly because of lower housing costs, but also because of job opportunities. And what drives Alberta's job opportunities? Largely, Alberta's economy is based on oil. And so as oil um, slowly oil over the last few years, the pricing of that has been climbing and climbing and climbing. And as oil prices go up, it drives the demand for the oil jobs here, and they need workers for that. And so, what are oil prices based on? All sorts of things. But one thing that they're based on can be wars or rumors of wars. And do we have that right now? Yes, we do. We have examples. We have NATO versus Russia on the battlefield of the Ukraine. We have Israel and Iran and their counterparts going at it right now. We have China eyeballing Taiwan. So all these things create instability. And so you need oil to drive war machines, not only, but also during times of instability, people look towards hard assets often to stop inflation from happening to their holdings. And so what are some hard asset examples? That could be art, that could be oil, that could be gold, that could be things like land. And so basically, this has been creating a snowball effect of people looking at Alberta. And, say Larry comes from Toronto to move to Calgary. He's not just going to leave Toronto, not tell anybody. His friends will say, "Hey, where'd you go?" Mo and Curly say, "Well, Larry, why'd you move?" He's going to say, "Well, I heard there's better jobs and I heard that there's cheaper housing. So I'm out of here." It's like, you guys should come too. And so this perpetuates. And so the Alberta Advantage, like I was saying, is now out there. The word's out. And it's even spreading, I think, internationally about the new places, the new hotspots to invest in Alberta. And, a lot of people are looking at that delta between Edmonton and Calgary and thinking, maybe Edmonton has some catching up to do. Maybe that's where I want to put my dollars. So basically, what I've been seeing now, uh, in the last, call it year or maybe even longer than that, but I'd say 90% of my phone calls right now of people interested in buying land are coming from the East Indian community. And you know what? They're outperforming historic buyers on their bids. The more, pull title, I'm seeing more Barars out there, more Sings out there. And I think part of the reason that they are able to outbid boils down to, these two, there's cultural differences. And so one cultural difference potentially is, historically buyers, when they go to buy a piece of land, it might be one or two entities buying something. So that could be Fred and Wilma go to buy a piece of land. It could be just Wilma buying a piece of land, or maybe it's Brookfield buys a piece of land, maybe Qualico buys a piece of land, right? It's just them. But in the East Indian community, what I find lots of times is they come in with their friends and family, and they'll buy in groups of 10 or maybe groups of 20, and they'll put offers in. What does that do? That lowers their risk because basically you're dividing that risk of buying something by 10 people or 20 people uh, on an investment. And so you got offered to pay more. Another way of looking at it is, say a property was $5 million, you might not a lot of people can afford $5 million, but if you have 20 and everybody can afford to put in 200K, there's a lot more people that can afford to put 200K. So there's a lot more demand for $200,000 investments than there's demand for $5 million investments. And so higher demand with the same amount of supply means higher prices. And so they're able to offer more on properties. And so I think that's also a partial explanation of what we see going on. But one thing that could potentially change this is politics. And so as we see things like it's harder to get into national parks, it's harder to get in front of a doctor, higher housing costs, higher land costs, there starts to become political pressure. And so this was just released in end of November by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada. I'll play it for you here real quick, and you can hear what he has to say uh, about what they're thinking they need to do now or what they're going to be doing about immigration. So just hang on a sec.
Immigration. Let's talk about it. In the last 2 years, our population has grown really fast, like baby boom fast. And increasingly, bad actors like fake colleges and big chain corporations have been exploiting our immigration system for their own interests. So we're doing something major. We're reducing the numbers of immigrants that will come to Canada for the next 3 years. Today, I'm going to let you in on what happened, where we made some mistakes, and why we're taking this big turn.
So as you can see, they're talking about putting the brakes on immigration for the next 3 years, and they're they're backing up a little bit, saying we made a mistake. We've got to rethink this and change our strategies. But in general, I would say the market seems fairly optimistic anyways. You know, interest rates have been coming down. And with interest rates coming down, I think a lot of people were just holding on, waiting to see, how low will those interest rates go and before they pull the trigger. And so they've seen the Bank of Canada being lowering, 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 and I think they're getting into a position to make their plays now. And you know, who knows how long that goes on for. But another thing that has people kind of interested is the new president-elect Donald Trump down south. A lot of people um, are feeling optimistic about that. As soon as it was announced that, he was the president-elect, we saw the stock market go. We saw the dollar start to fluctuate, right? So just the news of this pro-business president down there has also been impacting properties. Now, there's talks about tariffs and things like that, but in general, a strong US can make for a strong Canada. Another thing that I've noticed is, for years, land sellers, they had this expectation, this pricing expectation up here, and this is in general, and that was set from prices back in, the 2010s, 11s, 12s, when oil was way up here too. And so we were, they were those offers back in 2011 and 12 were setting this benchmark. But when oil fell, people were not willing to be paying those prices anymore because the absorption for people coming into Alberta just wasn't being seen by a lot of developers. And so prices were down here. And we didn't have a lot of transactions happening, you know, for the last, how many years is that? At least a decade. But now with oil prices going up, absorption going up, immigration going up, housing prices going up, now we're starting to see offers and things starting to hit those expectations again. There goes my light. One sec. Those expectations again. And so they're meeting expectations and we're starting to see more transactions happening. And so I feel like this will continue, this pattern will continue. We'll see more transactions coming into 2025 and even to the end of this year, just before, Christmas hits and people go to Hawaii again and Mexico again and Bali and all those places. But it'll probably start, besides the seasonality, start upticking and continue the momentum that we have. So I think that it'll definitely be interesting what's going on. If, this is a summary of the Alberta Land Report. If you want a copy, if you want to be subscribed, email me, like I said, 1988 Jones at gmail.com, and I can get you on the list. There's other things that go out with that subscription. The subscription's free, but there'll be other tidbits that come out. If you're interested in putting something in the Alberta Land Report, say an ad or a plug-in for your business where you want to write an article, that's free too. Just call me, we can talk about it. But in general, that's what I've seen. And feel free to like and share and ask questions. Oh, and if you have questions about your property, give me a call too. If you're looking at what's my property worth, give me a shout. I'm happy to talk and figure things out with you.